We are in the second shir of 5 in this Chinuch series. We did say that we will discuss and focus a little bit more on the teenage years, a little bit more difficult, very difficult subject to speak about, but as what we do. I do want to dedicate this shir to this being the fact that we're going through a very difficult time. And we're losing many of our own children. So even though this is a shir on being Mechanech our own children, we are losing our children. Just yesterday, 13 chayalim in one day were killed, if you realize. So we don't realize we're hearing numbers and we compare it and we don't really realize how bad it is. It's very, very painful. And therefore I feel that any schutim that we're able to do, I always am very pro telling people and trying, you have to add something extra. We have to do something else. If they could be sleeping on the floor and doing what they're doing, to be able to do this and mamish risking their lives door to door, then I think that it's obvious that we should be doing that. And at least if we could dedicate this idea of working on our children, coming and investing in our children to invest over there, so that would be a good le'ilu nishmas, b'ezrat Hashem. I'm going to start off with a word which not so many people are familiar with. It's called paralysis. What's that? That is what we are more familiar with is the pupa. You know what a pupa is? A pupa is one of the biggest miracles in the world that even scientists can barely get their fingers on to be able to figure it out. One of the most natural miracles that we have, and like I said, if you look in the science books themselves, they actually write almost a kind of living miracle, is the fact that you get a zachal, something that is a walking, wingless creature called a caterpillar, that's able to stumble around and do very clumsily, act and do different types of ways. He's able to disappear behind the cocoon. The cocoon is what he develops around him, the silk cocoon that he browns, and he turns into a pupa, which is known as a paralysis, and that is the idea that he kind of disappears, and then as we all know, when the cocoon hatches, suddenly he turns into this absolutely magnificent flying creature called a butterfly. A, the beauty compared to how ugly he was in the beginning, and B, the fact that he can actually change all his features. But C, what's most incredible is that it's literally, and I saw these words in a scientific magazine once, they called it literally a tchiyat hametim. That's what they wrote, a resurrection of the dead. Because he has no pulse, he has nothing, he turns into somewhat of a larva, that he doesn't have any type of existence, it doesn't have anything, a completely tchadshut, a complete newness that happened from nowhere. Something that turned into a soup, and turns into an absolutely detailed, sophisticated creature that can mamish fly from here to here. How long did it take us to learn how to fly? And here it is that this little caterpillar can go and disappear, kill itself, and kind of turn into something that actually is able to go aloft. An incredible, incredible thing that we have. That is the idea of the caterpillar turning into this butterfly. Now, in the middle, in the interim, here's what we call a beinish mashot. What's beinish mashot? As they say in Yiddish, nishta here, he's nishta here. He's not there and he's not here. He's not there and he's not anywhere. He's somewhere in the middle, where he's not a caterpillar and he's not a butterfly. He's neither. But eventually he turns into something. That's the power of this tchiyat hametim, of this newness. If you already hear the mashal, this is coming to make a nimshal to what we are discussing today, B'ezrat Hashem, and that is the ideas of the teenager. Yes, he's a pupa. He's nothing, he's nishta here, nishta here. That's the problem that happens over here. He's a little bit of a place of imbalance, of somewhere has left his youth, has left his childhood background, but he hasn't really held adulthood yet, and we'll see why. Nowadays is different than in the past, but yes, and nowadays at least, he hasn't hit what we call adulthood. Of course, he's bar mitzvah, and he had the big tie on, and he was able to read in the Torah, and everybody says, now you're a man, and we all know that he still is a big child with a hat on his head, and it's still not there. Nishta here, nishta here. That's the best description that I can give for a good teenage child, because he tends to be not on this side of the rainbow and not on the last side of the rainbow. If you remember, when we were children, there's a certain, for those of us who still remember that, depends how far away you are from that time period, but during the time period that we were children, you felt a real kind of feeling of protection. You always felt your parents, Abba is big and strong, your mommy's there to hold you, to protect you. If anything goes wrong when you're younger, you feel much more batuach, you feel much more secure. You're in a place of security. As we all know, more or less things are kind of kalil, kind of light. Even if something happens by tomorrow, within the next day, you already forgot about the problems. Things are more or less predictable. You have your day kind of predictable. There's nothing too over difference, and you're able to do this, of course, and most importantly, you have no chiyuvim, no obligations. There's no real obligations. Things are pretty safe, protected, and you're good to go. That's the point when we are young children. When we're young children, that's what it has. But suddenly, when you move on to stage 2, if you will, and you move on to the next stage that goes a little bit upward, what we'll call the teenager years, getting a little bit higher, suddenly you're going into a world that's a little bit unknown, a little bit that's, a little bit that's what we call fearful, what we call a me'ayem, something that's actually threatening a little, because you have to be able to be around people and around making sure that you're doing the right thing and doing the safe thing. You are taken to task, you're being judged, you're being looked at, and of course sometimes, and this is not necessarily if it's true or not, but he feels very unprotected because my parents, they're not as smart as I thought they were. They just don't have the capabilities. I just thought I could rely on these guys, but you know what? Maybe I'm really smarter than them, and they don't necessarily feel that they're the ones being protected by their own like. And therefore it becomes into this kind of beinish mashut, this pupa, which I mentioned to you before, where you're in a state of, you're not really sure about where I'm holding. And this is what we call the difference between the chelik regesh and the chelik seichel, or if I say the chelik nafshi and the chelik sichli. There's the difference, the gap in between the power of the mind and the power of the nefesh. Because in one kind of respect, your regashot, his emotional impact has a certain amount of self-confidence, self-esteem. This is what I'm going to do. I'm pretty positive. This is what I want to go. And at the same time, the sechel is clumsy. It's not, as they say, mevushal yet. It's not fully mature. It's not ripened. It's not holding where it's supposed to be. He's still being mitmoded with the situation. He's still grappling with the situation that's in front of him. And he's apt and almost 100% for sure going to be making mistakes. In other words, he has the self-confidence and esteem and positivity that he can be doing events which he's really not yet holding at being able to do. And this difference, this gap that happens between there leads to what we are known as the tipesh esrei in Hebrew, that we call the tipesh esrei. The age of doing things but doing it in a very clumsy type of way. I know that I'm not a baby. You don't have to tell me what to do, Abba, right? I know what I'm doing and that's it. And then why do you always have to be involved in everything I do? I've done it. I'm fine. Okay? That's usually the type of statements that we might be familiar with. But at the same time, we know, even though they're telling us that you are so primitive, you are such from the previous door, if you would just know how things are, that suddenly you'd start realizing that maybe it's time to let go. They're walking on this slight tightrope. On a tightrope, which is, like we said, nish tehir, a very fine line to be able to go from one side to the next. And they end up having, as a result of that, many kind of what we call stirot, contradictions within themselves, or in their personalities. I'm going to say like a Mr. Jekyll, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, right? It's a half and half type of thing. He's always, in some ways, has this type of face and that type. Some face, he's actually loving and caring, or she can be, especially, a girl is much more apt to being loving or caring, until you say the wrong word, or you said something, you didn't even realize you said something wrong, and suddenly you're being screamed at, you have no realize what's happening. Suddenly she's upset at you. I don't want to use strong words like hatred, but, very strong, aggressive words against us, for whatever reason it is, that's A. Or, in one instance, they don't necessarily want to be walking with Abba right next to you in the kvish. What am I, a baby? I don't have to be right next to you. But in certain instances, tug, I need you, I have to, especially when it comes to the pocket. When it comes to using your wallet, I need to have you for this, or I need to have you for that reason. These types of things. I'm totally independent. I don't need to have anything else. But at the same time, he mimics everybody around him. All his friends acting in a very similar way. It really doesn't matter to me what anyone thinks. I'm just going to do whatever I want. But then he finds out next week that someone said X about him or Y about him, or so-and-so said this, or you said this, or you let out the bag about something he did in the house, and he never is going to talk to you in his life again. You understand? These are contradictions that happens within the child itself that in some ways could be extremely, as we say, egocentric, focused on myself, but at the same time as being egocentric, being very disappointed in the world and the things around him, or sometimes just having to have his own status of being, trying to be on his own. So therefore you find these types of attitudes, these types of opinions, which are hard to get your fingers on. And again, right now we're only in the stage of getting definitions here, because when we get a definition of what we're dealing with, so then we know how to work with them. Seder? Girls especially, you'll find at this age will have a certain amount of moodiness. Girls are known for having moodiness. That's just part of their essence. I think even when they get married and become wives, they're still doing that thing. But I'm not going to say this in next year. But that's what happens. They have a certain moodiness, their ups and downs, and you kind of have to deal with if it's through the hormones or for whatever situation it is that's going on for what it is. And they'll be a little bit more testy with you. They'll try to, as they say, push boundaries here and there. Girls especially, and this we'll discuss soon maybe, girls especially, obviously we know the number one thing on the board for testing parents is obviously having to do with dress or pushing boundaries about how high the skirt is, how low the neckline is, etc., because we know that's the place of the Yetzer Hara for the Banat, of course, and of course everything has its place and time for everything, and boys especially at this age period will have a different type of gear of a problem, especially communication. Girls are obviously much better at communication. Boys are have a much more difficult time with any type of communication. Yes, how was your day? Fine. Okay, is there anything happened today? No. It's fine. School. Okay, fine. Have a nice day. We'll talk to you later. Right? Like I said, the communication gaps are a little bit less there, so that's something that needs to be worked on. I do want to spend a little bit of time on communication today. Okay. That's that. Also, obviously, risk-taking is much more of a male property, as we'll speak out soon why that might tend to happen. They tend to take a little bit more risks, putting themselves in trouble, and especially quick to get angry. Of course, they can go in both properties. That quick to get angry, to have a short ptila, as they say, a ptila ktsara, to not be able to have a thing. And if I get to extreme cases, which alvai chas v'shalom shouldn't be relevant, is we find statistically that yes, teenagers have a much higher percentage rate of suicide, and drugs also, but drugs not necessarily percentage-wise. And that's for this reason. Why is the suicide rate much higher when it comes to teenagers? So to speak, and the answer is very simply for the reason we just spoke out, because they're walking a tightrope. They're on two edges of a double-sided sword. They're in two places at the same time, and therefore it can cause a little bit of an issue. It's interesting, Shimshon Rufal Hirsch, who likes to give definitions of words many times, in Breshit in Perek Chet, he describes the word na'ar. What does it mean when it says the word na'ar? He says it has to do, this is his definition, lenanea, to move, to sway back and forth. Lashlich me'alav, lazuz mitzad letzad, to sway back and forth, to move, to shuckle back and forth, that's lashon na'ar, and to throw something off of you, to take kind of the all off of you. You move around, you're trying to get it off of you. A kind of lack of equilibrium, a lack of izun, if you will. And that is the yesod of what a na'ar is. This age, what we call the gil of na'arut, the gil that's getting a little bit older, is kind of swaying back and forth. It's not, and it's a good idea to think, half child and half adult. That's not the definition that's being placed over here based on the Sfarim and everybody, all Mechanech, that speak about this idea. It's all child or all adults. It's sometimes all of this and sometimes all of this. Sometimes acting completely childish, coming out of whack, something you surprise, and sometimes acting like an adult. It's a little bit more responsibility, acting like you're supposed to be. A little bit of everything. Okay, that's how it is. You want to act with them like a child. They have nothing to do with you. I don't want you to deal with me. You don't know how to treat me. I'm acting. You treat me like a child. I'm much bigger than you treat me. I'm not a child anymore. You treat them like an adult, and yes, you get michshalim, you get mess-ups, you get things that you wish wouldn't have happened. You have things that you wish you didn't put it into their hands. But that's how it is. That's what happens when you get into this type of situation. Okay, that is the status that we're speaking out. So if we're speaking it out, the gap between the sechel and the regis, the sechel and the nefesh, a lack of capabilities. Here we are. I'll tell you something that's written in a book called The Brain at the Teenager Years. It's written by Professor Havlin Corona, that they did MRI tests on the brain of a teenager. That sounds like fun, no? That's like a fun type of test to be able to do. They did MRI tests on the brain of during the teenager years, And they said that when they check the impulses that are going through the brain, you find a lot of activity. A lot of the brain cells, or whatever the impulses are, whatever that means, it gets broken down and gets reconstructed very, very quickly at a much more rapid pace that we are familiar with, as opposed to adults, l'mashal. It happens, a lot of breaking down and reconstructing, redeveloping itself on a constant basis in different spots of the brain. That's A. And B, some places get developed quicker than other places. Some places end up going slower and getting developed in a much slower pace, and some in a much more quicker space. L'mashal, surprise, surprise. The power of self-restraint reconstructs itself very slowly. Doesn't actually make it as quick as you would have expected. Doesn't happen. And therefore you find a certain amount of impulsiveness or dangerous decisions or decisions that come from the wrong place. Initiative, dafka, does get redeveloped much quicker. Taking initiative and doing things and these types of things. And therefore you find, like I said, different type of midot, different type of aspects that you could find many times overlapping during this time period. A lot of drama, or very insulted very quickly, or very frustrated at certain comments that are coming about. These are different parts of the brain, as we know, the frontal lobe, or whether it's the cerebral cortex, all these different types of places that they checked, and that was based on that showing a certain amount of where it's coming from. Okay? So if we would put this in a nutshell, I think that if you would look around, that many people would write the words something as teenagers are trying to find who they are. Seder? That sounds good. It's oversimplified though. Just to say the teenager is just trying to find who he is true, but it's a little bit oversimplified. The more active, the more accurate assessment to be able to describe what the teenager kind of is doing, especially based on the brainwaves which I was mentioning, he's actively trying to invent himself. They, or he or she, is actively trying to invent themselves. In other words, they're trying to get themselves to a situation where they're creating who they are, more than just finding who they are. I came from a certain background. I was told by my parents that this is the way I should grow up, whether it's religiously, whether it's socially, or whether it's in certain places and certain ways of acting. I was told by society that this is what I should be doing, or this is what's accepted to be done. And finally, he comes to terms with the idea that maybe not. Maybe I have a different type of interest. Maybe I want to go a different way. And therefore, is loaded and weighed down with a tremendous amount of opinions. Of course, they all know exactly what to do with the Arabs in Gaza. I mean, we also do, right? But a good teenager always knows exactly what the opinions are, what to do, and they know if Bibi would give him a simple sikha, he would take care of the problem that we're having in the South. I mean, we all have the same opinion in this case. But Bikaron, that's what it is. All political types of things I'm referring to over here, especially in Eretz Yisrael, where people care. When it comes to matters of religion, so when I become a certain type of age, when I become this age, so they're already clear about what the answers are supposed to be like. What I'm supposed to do, if I get a little bit more detail to being a Haredi, to being a little bit more extra, I don't like to say ultra-Orthodox, I just call it Orthodox in my opinion, but I guess it depends on who you ask. But to decide how to be Haredi or not, this is the time when I can start making those decisions how I can. My favorite that I enjoy when you hear this, and you hear this sometimes from certain teenagers, is of course the question is there a God? Is there a Kadosh Baruch Hu? And this age-old question, which the biggest philosophers going from Aristotle in way of thinking for thousands of years about the existence of God and how to make these decisions. You have the biggest minds as Einstein and others who have made these types of decisions whether there is a God or not. Of course, I did not mention the Rabbanim because, of course, we all know their answers. The Vilna Gaon made a very nice decision. I think he tends to be a very impressive, intelligent person, the Vilna Gaon. But Al Kopanim, we had incredible minds that have philosophized, that have went through this, cosmological, very deep, intrinsic question of the presence of God, and how can it be? Because we know a world that runs the way it runs cannot be godless, but at the same time, people can't understand a being of a God that never started, that has no beginning and no end, and never created himself. It's just something that just boggles the mind. And we have this 16-year-old that says, I'm an atheist. He's made the decision. Wow, I always find it incredible. I don't even feel like arguing with a person. It's like such a humorous type of thing that suddenly, at this ripe old age of 16, he's come to the very deep and philosophical decision. After studying all the semantics to the right and to the left, he's come to this decision. There is no God. Beautiful, like that's what I'm saying. It only can come from a stubborn, obnoxious, come a head that comes from such a place that, yes, I know everything. And that's how my position is. Of course, we move on to other things. Of course, they know how to make money 10 times better than you. I'm never going to make money like my parents. They didn't know, they messed up, but I'm Be'ezrat Hashem going to be one of the richest people in the world. Me and Elon Musk, we're going to be hand in hand together, Be'ezrat Hashem, because I know exactly how I'm going to be one of the great richies, etc., etc. Of course, positions in clothing, position in music, position in schools, about what type of schools is correct. Everything has an opinion. Like I said, a little bit of a premature opinion. If you went with MRI scans, you'd see that yes, it comes yes, sometimes no, but it's a time of making decisions, giving opinions, making decisions, even though I'm clumsy, even though I'm fobbling, even though I'm not necessarily making the decision that's 100% correct, but it's okay because that's what comes with this age period. That's what's coming. There's a drive to be able to find and invent the person I am at the same time as that's connected to by Seichel. So if we have an expression which I one time saw, I am not the son of so-and-so. I'm not the brother of so-and-so. I'm not there. I am who I am. And if I am who I am, then really who am I? And that's really the time to decide who am I. And it's really a fundamental decision. It's really a fundamental time because the Midrash brings down that a person is made up of 7 facets. It goes through 7 different types of facets of life, till 3, until 12, until then. It goes through 7 different facets of life. We're made, as we say, of a 7-story building. As we know, with every 7-story building, you can never skip a story. If you skip a story, then you have the Leaning Tower of Pisa. You're not going to be able to survive in such a scenario. Every story is important, but most importantly are the bottom. The bottom floors are the most fundamental. If you skip the penthouse, the most expensive, but if you skip it out, no, nish gefährlich. So it drops off. The building still stands. But in the beginning stages, it is so vivid. It is so important. It is so important that it's cooked up, that it's prepared, that it's put in its place, that it's able to be done correctly. And that's why this age factor is just so important, because everything lies over there. Everything lies over there. There's a certain bubbling that happens, and if we treat it correctly, we've created a person that will be able to be self-sustained when they get older after this age period, when they become independent and get married. And that's what we're looking to do when they leave the house, and we're waiting for them to leave the house. But when they leave the house, we want them to be prepared to be that stage that they can stand independent. And this is such a fundamental stage. You cannot skip the stage. You have to deal with it. You have to deal with it to whatever extent that you can. You have to know that it's a story in the house which is very, very fundamental. Okay? It's funny, there's a Midrash Tanchuma in Parashat Vayakel. I'm just going to mention to you 2 or 3 quick chazals. So you say I didn't quote any chazals in the process. There's a Tanchuma in Parashat Vayakel that says that there are 3 names to a person. People have 3 names. Everybody has 3 names. One is what your parents called you. Masha Nikra Avivemo. I quote you word for word. Masha Korim Lo Avivemo. What your parents call you, that's your name. Echad Masha Korim Lo Bnei Adam. The second one is what people call you. And it says the third one is Ve'echad Masha Kana Loi Le'atzmo. What he is named for himself. What he has taken in for himself. Says the Midrash, Tov Shemekulam, the best of all of them, Mashekoneh Lo Le'atzmo, the name that he has assessed for himself. This is the age where he's starting to develop his own name. I don't want mommy and daddy's name anymore. Especially, they actually literally change the name sometimes. They cut some nicknames to try to change it in some type of way that's different. But even without that, they go ahead and they're trying to assess their own thing. And you know what? Beinenu, like we're going to see, it's not unhealthy. It's sometimes a very good thing. It's a very good thing. Not just sometimes. It's very much a good thing. Because if you know, amongst the people who are involved in kiruv especially, they know that the people who are most matzliach, that were most matzliach to do kiruv on, are those people that are the toughies. If you go to an Arachim seminar, they say this over and over and over again. The ones that are most successful are the ones that make the most noise, and they make a lot of noise. They scream, they interrupt the rabbi in the middle of talking, saying, Ma pitom, shtuyot, they'll tell them the mamish, they can speak very sharp, and they say those are the people that are fish bait. They are just absolutely bait. They know that these guys are hook, line, and sinker. because they know these are the people that are actually take initiative. They're actually interested. They actually want to be able to figure out. That means they have a passion, and the passion is somewhere. It's located somewhere, and that passion is actually placed in the right place. And it's good to be able to have such a passion, because that is how a person eventually actually gets hooked up. He has an interest to be able to go ahead and do it. As opposed to the one who sits in the seminar, in the background, and kind of quietly, just passively listens to the nice drashot, and they're excellent drashot, you should know, top of the line. I always try to sneak myself in there, kind of take off my kippah and try to sneak in there if I'm able to, and put on a baseball cap, something. They don't let you in. They say, "What, you Haredi? Get out!" Yeah, it's not worth it to be religious sometimes. But when you go and they go quietly and listen, those people just kind of stay quiet and slip through the cracks, and they don't continue. They just fall away, and they don't continue because the passion is not there. And you should know it's the same thing with Kebiyachol, the teenagers, this type of lifestyle that we have. The ones who are, if I could say, a little bit more affirmative, a little bit more strong, can be a little bit more passionate. Of course, the ones that are much more annoying, but you know what? They're the ones who turn around much quicker. I won't say the word quicker, but you know that they're the ones who can actually be the ones that will make the turnaround eventually. They're the ones that eventually do come back. They're the ones that come back. If you use the right rules, then it comes back. Then they're able to come back. As opposed to the ones that are quiet and reserved in their little eggshells, that never speak up. So a lot of times twofold. First of all, if they really are having problems, then it ends up staying that way. They never end up fixing them. That's first of all. It never ends up getting fixed. And second of all, they remain kind of problematic children or adults when they grow up, meaning even if you would call them, lo aleinu, not religious, but even as marriage partner, as a spouse, they're not going to be very successful spouses, because they're people that are very mufnam, very broken inside, never cleared the air, never had their issue, never were able to clear the issues, and therefore it's a little bit of a problem. So yes, sort of speak, it's a bracha in disguise to yes have a little bit of challenges here and there from them if you know how to handle it well. And over here I want to mention something very important, which this is based on Mechanech. I'm already quoting this from Rabbi Yakovzin, who was the Rav Mechanech in many of these things. But you should know that it's very true that no, not every child has to have what we call this mashber, this breakdown of teenager life. Now, it's contrary to popular belief, and I have heard, some people say everybody goes through it some way. Not necessarily, and it's not true at all, especially if you know how to fan the flames, if you know how to wind it and prepare before you get into the stormy weather, then a lot of times you will prevent 90, even 100% of the whole event. If a person knows how to deal with it, like B'ezrat Hashem, that's the idea of these shirim, obviously, but if a person's able to know how to prevent it, then you can prevent it. Now, of course, not always, because people are people. And when you grow up, everybody has nature and nurture, and that's fine, because you know that everyone has their type of, their thing, as they say. It's fine, not everybody can. But it's not a fact that every single child has to go through it. That's not true. But you should be able to see simanim, when a person's actively disagreeing, that one's easy. But even quiet, there are also quiet simanim, which B'ezrat Hashem will also be speaking about, to be able to see when we're getting into a type of issue that has to be dealt with. And that I'm referring to the quiet problem. The person who's quietly causing issues. The person who's there, it's very important to read the simanim. Just don't let them be quiet, and then one day, boom, kaplui, what happened? Pitom, it happened all in one day. It's shtuyot, and I've seen it over and over. I'm telling you, I've seen it so many times. Unfortunately, I just saw the simanim coming, and you give the warning to the parents, but usually they're not interested in going and doing some type of measures in the process, because in the meantime, he's doing fine, so why do I have to do it? And then one day, suddenly you find that he's walking around without a kippah, or he's walking around with a chup as high as the waves of Hawaii can reach, usually, and that's a nice good sign of what it could be. Or suddenly her dress is just a little bit, not making it to the knees for some reason. She's just, I guess, got a little bit taller or something like that. She's not able to do it, etc., etc. The sleeves get a little bit shorter. Suddenly it all happened. It's never, ever, ever suddenly. It's never suddenly. One day a good from Yid doesn't suddenly decide to just take it off. It was bashel inside. It was in a pressure cooker that was going inside, that was not dealt with, and I'm not blaming the parents ever, and that's not the idea ever. Every situation is its own thing, but in the end of the day, it wasn't dealt with for however it needed to be dealt with. It could be, or other things caused the nezek. Again, I think it's tipshus when people just go and blame parents immediately. But at the same time, you should know that that comes from a certain place that, yes, these falls tend to have a certain breaking point, but it's good, and sometimes it's good, and we just have to know how to weather them. A good example of this is a classic, one of my favorites, is we all know, and if you ever go to the zoo, you should know, they have an area in the back of the Gan Tanachi where they have incubators over there, where they have eggs, where the birds have laid eggs, or different animals have eggs over there. And if you got in there at the right time, I only seen this once, not that it's so common, you have to have your own birds to be able to do this, but you'll see how a little chick is able to get out of an egg. He slowly but surely chips and chips and chips at that egg, slowly but surely. It takes a long time, and it takes a lot of effort. This guy is a little measly nothing. He has no feathers, the poor thing. His beak is like the size of your fingernail. He's a misken, and you just watch it and go, whoa, I feel so bad for him. You just wish it's so easy for you. All you have to do is take your finger and go boom, and you make a nice cute hole, and it'll be able to get out there. And you just have, you have such rachmanas. State and facts, there's no question. Anytime you go and help him break the egg, the chick 100% will not survive. Not because he's going to leave. He might live for a few days. Not because you gave him too much air at the same time. Because he has to flex his muscles. The way a chick knows how to be able to come a chicken, or whatever fancy bird you want to tell me, right? And then it turns out to be an eagle, is to be able to know how to break through the egg himself. He has to exercise in place. Yes, he has to make that fall sometimes. He has to get there. But by doing that fall and doing that difficult time, and it looks so painful, and you just have rachmanis on the poor guy, and you wish you wouldn't have to go through this. But when you do that and you try to cut corners for him, he will not survive. He can't survive, Pashut. It won't happen. Any of these animals that are raised in the zoo, they can't be sent to the wild because they were spoiled brats. They got their food sent to them. They never had to fight for food, so we all know that they're not going to be able to manage themselves. You understand? That's the idea. So yes, sometimes it's good that we go and we work and let them work on their mistakes themselves. Let them tumble, and we have to be there. How do we have to be there? And this is a beautiful expression I one time saw, and it very much hits the bullseye in our subject that we're doing. There's two different types of parenting. There's a parenting that we can call helicopter parenting, which the majority of parenting does. That means that we stand above the ground and we go ahead and we look to left and we look right and we see everything, and they know exactly that we're hovering on top of them, just like all those good-for-nothing terrorists flying all over Gaza, that they know exactly when they see a plane flying, they know it's coming soon for them. And that's the same thing. They always know that we're there, hovering above them. Our shadow is, the shadow of the plane, like the shadow of the helicopters right on top of them. They always know that we're there. That's one type of parenting. The ideal parenting, and especially at this age, is what we would call submarine parenting. Submarine parenting means that, yes, I could see things on the telescope. I see everything that's happening, but he doesn't really see me. Everything's kind of behind the scenes, and I can see him left or right. The submarine is just an absolutely incredible invention. Yes, Jules Verne thought of it even before they came up with it. Such an incredible type of idea to be able to float in the water, see all the ships, and do whatever you want to any ship without them knowing you existed. It was a horrible thing in the World War II. The Germans used it very ruthlessly against many ships that came to sail to their direction. But to use a submarine when you're coming to parent your child is fantastic, because they don't see you, but you're there protecting them from here to there, making sure they don't take the wrong turn here and there. Just make sure you don't shoot any torpedoes. Watch out with the torpedoes, right? That much you want to watch out for. But b'ikaron, when you do that, so yes, they can stumble. Yes, they can fall. Yes, it will be painful. But in the end of the day, someone's going to be there to help them brush themselves up, get up, and be able to do it again. And be able to get themselves up. One of my favorite memers that I heard once, B'Shem Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, and I think it's a beautiful concept that everybody should always remember. When a cup or when a plate falls off of the table, the reason why it broke is not because it filled. It broke because it hit the ground. Only when it hit the ground, that's when it breaks. In other words, if we can let them fall, let them try your best to prevent them from hitting the ground, from hitting rock bottom, from hitting the states of Hinuch. That's what Abba and Ima are there for. You're there to be able to prevent it from getting to such a state, so you know you've been successful. Nobody survives in life without difficulties. I will quote the famous Rav Hutner, the Pachad Yitzchak, a beautiful letter, Kuf Chavchet. Everybody, it's Pashut reading that everybody should know that letter. I'm not going to say by heart, but you should know the words of the letter. But one of the things that he says there, very lashently, is the famous line that he says, when Chazal say, Sheva Yipol Tzadik V'kam, that a tzaddik is a tzaddik who falls 7 times and gets up. He says it's not that even though they fell 7 times they got up and that's what made them a tzaddik, even though it happened, it still worked. It's because they fell 7 times. The tzaddik only became the tzaddik because he fell 7 times. He needed to be nichshol. He needed to fall in order to get to the place. And he makes an example of Chafetz Chaim, the man of Lashon Hara. He said, who knows how much he had to do in order to get to the stage of being successful, to be able to vanquish that Yetzer Hara of Lashon Hara, to be able to get to such a stage. And I always say that that's the beauty of our Gdolim. Over compared to Lahavdil million of Dalot, the difference between us and the Goyim, the people that are heroes are people that Harvard, they learned to be able to become a Rav Chaim Kanievsky. You know what that takes? To be able to become a Rav Shlomo Zalman or a Rav Yosef, how many years and hours and days to be able to get there? And I'm not talking about only in brain power, in midot, in excellence, and everything all around. And here they are. Who are the people that they cherish? A fantastic singer, Chazak Baruch. You know, the guy was born with a nice voice. Very nice, have a nice day. Jordan didn't touch a ball till he was 16 years old, and he was in the NBA within 4 years. Tell me the truth, you know, very nice. I give him you know, and he's considered the king, the people they bow down to, and they'll do everything for such a person. There's no amelid, no avoda. Almost comes naturally. You have to practice how to shoot a ball in the hoop a few times. But ikaron, there's nothing to value when you're dealing with such things. As opposed to our heroes are ones who dafka came through breaking points. Pain came in a place, and that's what made the person to become where he is. And yes, that's what we are looking for in our children. It's not so bad that they're going through what they're going through. Of course, we never want our children, we never daven for it, we never looking for it. But when it happens, play the submarine, play the background, and try to be able to be there to protect them at the right time, to be able to do what's necessary to go. Okay, that is the big yesod here that we're trying to do. When a person is able to get to such a stage, so then you have an idea that the person becomes himself. He knows how to take care of himself. The Rambam writes in the end of Shemitah V'Yovel, when he talks about the famous Rambam, where he talks about Lo Shevet Levi Bilvad, that anybody could become a Talmid Chacham if he really pushes himself to. He can go ahead and try to get there. Kadosh Yomer Loi, he can become a Kodesh. But the Rambam says a very important lashon of Nadva Rucho Oto. When his ruach came to do it, when he wanted to get there, that's when he will get there. To be able to get there has to come a little bit from zich, from himself, from the I, from myself. I have to plant it from the self that comes within myself, and from my own place to be able to do it. It can't be that society pushed me there, that social pressures put me there. Of course, that's an incentive, and that's, yes, how we work, sort of speak. But at the same time, it has to be from his own push, from his own self that got him to get to that stage. That's how he's going to be able to do it. There's another Rashi, which I want to quote in many places. If you look in Rashi, in many places, it's always something that bothered me. Until I saw the Maharal and also the Siftei Chachamim answer the question. All the time, whenever it says in the Psukim, it says by Hagar, let's say, or by Aaron when it was talking about taking his sons, many times it says you should take the person, kach, take that person, or take this, kach, so and so, take certain person. Rashi always repeats himself. He says it many times, unlike himself actually, and he always says the same 2 words, kachehu bidvarim. Take him with words. Be cogent, be convincing, pull him, and get him into doing this event. Make him do it. Go ahead and go to do it. And the question is, why? Why is it necessary to use such words? Just say, kachatod, take him by the hand and pull. That's what you do. Just take him like you do. Like that's how, when you go ahead and you make a kinyan on something, you go ahead and you pull it. When a chassan is taking, the reason why a chassan walks with a kala down after the chuppah and they walk back, they usually are holding hands. People don't realize why they do it. They just think it's for being romantic. Could be that also. But the real reason is when you go into the yichud room, so kebiyachol, you're making a kinyan on the isha. You're making a kinyan on her in the yichud room. So you're supposed to pull her into the room. That's a great way to start a marriage, huh? So to pull her in. So Baruch Hashem, we don't do that because it won't work so well. But Bikaron, that's the idea that you kind of are holding the hand in order to kind of take her into the room to kind of make a kinyan on the Isha to pull her in there. Now you guys tell me, should I say that next week? I'm not sure if I should say that, but Kopanim, that's the idea. So what's the problem? So over here in Rashi, I said probably 10 times. I'm not Rav Chaim, I can't tell you 100% how many times it is, but it's at least 10 times in the Chumash that says this idea, kacheyu bedvarim, taking that. So it says the Siftei Chomer and the Maharal, the same thing. You can never take a person by physical, because the person is not his body. He's not the body that you see, the physical existence. Of course you could muzzle him, of course you could throw him in jail, but you don't really have the person. You never have the person. You're telling me the people captured over there are had in Aza. They're not in Aza. They're not be'etzim there. They don't have them. To have the person you need to have is dat. You have to have his intelligence, his ratzon, his interests, his wanting, his yearning. That's the way to do it. Kacheyu bedvarim. Talk him into it. Convince him. It's a good thing to do. I think that you should become the leader of Klal Yisrael. You have to convince Yeshua. Kacheyu bedvarim. Yeshua, go do it. Take Hagar. Convince Hagar. Wow, you're going to be nizdabik to Avram Avinu. You're going to be able to do that. Kacheyu. Always take him in a way that you have to convince him. That is the only way. Ba'avuta shel ava. That's the only way to connect and be able to raise our children, to be able to be successful, to be able to get to such a thing, and that is building themselves from within themselves. It's coming from within themselves, not coming from something from without, but something from within. Letting them have their own independence, gathering it in a place that they can have their own autonomy, to a certain extent, if I could say, to be able to get there to a place that they want to do it, to want to do it themselves. That's the ideal of this chinuch that we're trying to raise. That's the ideal place that we're coming from. I'm going to mention here, and I'm coming to the end here. I see I only have 6 more minutes. So I do want to mention a quick, because it just helps with what we're mentioning here. But Keviyachol, a quick background of what happened that only in the past 70 or 80 years, we suddenly discovered there's this concept called the teenager. Where did this invention come that suddenly all this fearful delight that occurred? And you should know that the Goyim themselves in many of their books discuss these concepts. Like, where did this idea of adolescence or the danger of the teenagers come about that had to come about and do that? They always were discussing the idea of the child having to watch out for the parents. They were raising children, kind of speak, as child having to watch out for the parents. And now the next generation, they're raising parents having to watch out for the children now. That's what happened as a result of all their extra preventatives. So some of the theories are basically, to a certain extent, that yes, it kind of did exist in the past. It was around in the past. But even though it was around in the past, it was restrained. It was restrained from people. It was withheld. They didn't let it come out to the forefront. It was something that was intrinsic within them, but it wasn't able to be planted, to be brought out to its thing. And after Baruch Hashem, we were so nice and we let them free themselves out. We liberated all their deep interests and drives to be able to do what they needed to do, and suddenly, Baruch Hashem, now they're able to act like the terrible teens that we're so familiar with. Kebiyachol, mamish the same exact thing they say about the gays and all the lesbians, all these same type of svaras that they always like to say, that everything was really restrained, and Baruch Hashem, because of us, we were able to take care of all these problems by just giving us more problems. Anyways, that's one of the things. Another theory is that it could be that since it was never discussed, it never existed, which has a certain truth to it. When it wasn't discussed, it wasn't true. Just like with your 4-year-old, when they say something to say no, so you go ahead and say yes, and you go ahead and tell them. But now when they're 14 and they say no, you go, oh, how terrible teens are starting. Oh, no. Okay, we have to start getting the psychologim out. We have to start getting these things, therapists, this is that. Okay, whatever you say, honey, I understand. You said no, it's no. Seder, but let's just figure it out. In other words, they said that Kibiyachol, by talking about it so much, it kind of brought it out. The number one answer on the board is, and this is very important for us to be able to read, and this is definitely the truth, because they did certain studies, and it's very clear that places that are more primitive, meaning the less modernized, primitive not in a negative verb, but as opposed to less modernized places have less of this teenage problem. The more modernized the place is, the more modernized a place is, the more advanced civilization is, the more problematic. I am putting technology on the side, bli neder. I plan on having one proper shir on just technology. I don't want to discuss technology. That's not where we're going to, which obviously is connected to this that we're discussing also. But let's leave technology on the side because it wasn't so bad 60 or 70 years ago either. But they noticed that the place that the more technology, the more modern the whole civilization was more problematic. And the reason is because in the olden days, the way things were, and we're all not familiar, because yes, we still come from that generation, but we all know what happened in, I like to call it the little house on the prairie type of scenarios. Everybody used to go out to work. The kid became 12, 13, ripe old age. It's time for you to get out. Put on your suspenders, right, your overalls, and go ahead and get out there. And it's time to do. There's no more pampering. We took care of you enough years. It's time for you to start taking care of the house. It was an absolute necessity for them to go out of the house and take care. A girl in the house, of course you have to go ahead and help mommy to be able to take care of you. There's ever a popular question, did it ever bother you? How did women take care of the whole entire house? It was crazy. There was no washing machine. They had to wash thing by thing by hand, every piece of clothing by hand. There was no dishwashers. There was no refrigerators. They had to go get ice from certain places to be able to keep the ice going and carry the water and everything to do. There was a lot of work, and Baruch Hashem, we have our daughters to be able to help us to be able to take care of it. And that's how it was a certain thing, meaning responsibility already occurred from that age. In other words, they went into the real world already at that age. So they're already facing reality. There's a concept which is very nice, which is an important concept to know, is in a situation of ein breira, there's no choice, everything goes. Adrenaline kicks in. You can have incredible powers that didn't exist. We saw it 2 months ago. Incredible gvura that we saw in the south of what people were able to do, risk their lives to be able to do, because we're in your situation of ein breira, that there's no choice. It's a situation of do or die. Of everything about it, you have powers that go over and beyond. Of course, classically in the Holocaust, you read stories there that you don't believe are written by man, that another person, physical person, could have survived or done such a thing. But in a state of ein breira, in a state of situation that there's no choice, that's what happens. A good example of this, by the way, and this we're coming to finish basically, is a child who's in school. Even if he's successful and you want to pull him out, it's one of the worst things you could do. It's extremely dangerous to do such a thing. Because once the child knows that he's already switching out to somewhere else, then over here he's not obligated. The main reason why a child is good in school is because ein breira. That's just the situation. That's where I am, and I have to make the most of it. Not in a negative way. School should not necessarily be negative. Shouldn't be, and we try our best, but at least in the situation, once the child knows, like, who's the worst kids always in class? The 12th graders, right? Once they graduate, they already know what college they're going to, they already know next year, they've already been accepted to the seminar, they've already been accepted to. The worst kids, you can't have them. It's already, I don't have to be here anymore, ein breira. So what I'm saying is that what happened is, in this situation, when they got to a situation of, this is where we are, this is where we're located. A child at that age already was a responsible adult, and it had to be that way. But by us, it's not like that. Yes, we pamper them to a certain extent. How much do we pamper them? Even if they have chores in the house, be'emet, if the kid sleeps in, is he going to go hungry? He's really not going to make the food. You're not going to make him food. And if you don't give him food, he'll call the revacha on you, right? He'll call the, how do you say the revacha in English? The social services on you, right? He'll take care of that. You're not allowed to do. The kids are in charge, especially at that age. They know that they're taken care of more or less. Yes, they have certain responsibilities here and there, but it's abstract responsibilities. To take a test, fail. Make this test, got to be. It's abstract responsibilities. It's not like the responsibilities which we have of the chayalim in the down south right now. They could be guys who were sitting in the park here playing football a few weeks ago, and they just, doing nothing and kind of sleeping. And now they're going down there and risking their lives. And Tamin Li, they should all be protected and safe, but believe me that that's what they're doing. They're there on all fours. You understand? They're there everywhere and doing what they can because they're living the real life. And that's a big preventative to what happened. That was the changeover. And yes, as a result of that, yes, we kind of, from this, ended up getting an amount of people now that are left with a lack of incentive, a lack of thing. So what is their incentive? What is the thing that makes them responsible, or what makes them interested, what we would call kind of a sense of identity. Trying to find out who you are, or what's important to me, is to be able to give a good impression on people. And that's why you find unusually, more than us and more than children, what they care about so much are friends. Friends are an avodah zarah at this age, mamish. Friends, and it's funny because the friends are friends of the same friends. You think that, someone who's on the top of the circle chain of the chain. But everybody so cares about what everybody thinks of me and all that. But it comes from this place of a meaning of identity, of power, because that is where I am. If I was busy working, my thing was my job, and what I have to do, or taking care of the family, that's my job, that's my ya'ad, that's my tachlit chaim. So then that would be there. But once that's not there, so it comes in a place of making an impression, connecting with my friends, knowing how to handle it in the appropriate way. And that's why we end up finding that, yes, that's why it has, and that's why we're saying, with this we're finishing, the importance here and the focus is an importance of giving a sense of independence, of autonomy, of being on his own. Of course, I'm not, giving his own space, being able to do that, and that's called submarine parenting, being able to let him feel he's on his own, let him feel that he's kind of getting there, but Abba and Ima are always there. He wants that sense of trust. He wants a tzorach, he has a need for bitachon, for protection from Abba and Ima. He wants that protection, but at the same time, he doesn't want you involved. Don't stick your nose in my affairs. Why are you getting busy? So you have to figure out in an ingenious way how to be able to stick your nose in his affairs without him knowing, which, Bezrat Hashem, again, we will speak about that in the focus. So if we focus, and I summarize what we spoke about today, in a quick focus, we'll mention the 5 main points is A, the idea of bitui atzmi, is being independent, having his own independence is bitui atzmi, which comes a little bit with stubbornness, or sometimes bikortiut is being critical, and of course needing a little bit of his individuality, money, to be able to make his own, go out and buy things. Don't buy things for me. I want to do it on my own. I will make my own decisions what type of clothing I'm going to buy. Don't buy my shoes. It's my decision that I'm going to be. That's A. B, we have the interest to be different, the need to be different, which means a little bit of bididut, being on your own, alone, not being then a different type of dress, like we said, different types of hairstyles, pushing the boundaries a little bit, especially music. Sometimes it'll come out that way. If he's a good kid, maybe his big, if his big rebellion says Alvai should be wearing tchelet. So wear tchelet, Alvai, it should be something like that. But these types of things that comes from that. Number 3 on the list is, of course, like we mentioned, a need for chevra, the need for attention from friends. Friends are very focused, very important. He needs to be loved, cared. He needs to be part of a group. He needs to always be there, and therefore you can never, in the nafkamina, obviously, you can never put down a friend. You cannot battle a friend. You cannot make fun of a friend. Yes, we have to figure out how to get rid of a bad friend. Of course, we know there's always the rotten apple that ruins the whole entire core, but that has to be done with intelligence. Bezrat Hashem also, I hope we'll be able to speak about that, Bli Neder, to be able to do that. But at the same time, you have to know that the friends can never just be thrown out. You have to give it credence like every other avodah zarah in the world. Okay? Because it's considered something that's incredibly important, like we just mentioned. Why? Number 4 is the need for chaviyata regashot, for having regesh, of connecting, for being able to chase my ta'avot that I was never able to chase. Hopefully kosher ta'avot. I'm not only saying that, but being able to go where no man has ever gone before, to be able to go and do things that are a little bit out of the box, things that you not necessarily are considered, that you would like to do within our norms, a little bit more chafshiyut, a little bit more freedom. That's something that they're always looking for. And lastly, which I just ended off the end of the shir with, is the need for bitachon, is the need for security, to know that even though my parents are not meddling in my affairs, they're not bothering me, so to speak, but at least I know that they're people I can trust. They keep to their word. They're consistent. They're there for me when I need them. When I need a lending ear to be there, I know that Abba and Ima will be there to be for me. This is a summary overall and a definition of what we call the teenager years. Bezrat Hashem, in the next 2 or 3 shiurim, we will be able to speak about a little more details of plans of what to do specifically in each one of the different scenarios, different ideas of how the house should be looked. And like I said, we plan on having one Bli Neder shir on technology. And I don't know if we have time, we'll do one shir maybe on ADHD also. I'm not sure if we'll get there. Say that? Okay.